change of ship. A change of ship. And I don't know if you enjoyed it, but I love this quote from Elizabeth Elliot. Worry is the antithesis of trust. You simply cannot do both. So just go ahead and conduct a little experiment here. I want you to worry about something and trust God about it all at the same time. Can't do it, you know? Yeah, I suppose it is possible to vacillate back and forth, that we're humans and I'm worried about it. Then, oh no, wait, I said I was going to trust God and I trust. And then that worry tries to creep back in. But Elizabeth Elliot is exactly right that, we can't do both. We got to just have trust. And so what had happened here, she sets it up this way. In the beginning paragraph of this chapter, you can see that they had been sailing on a certain ship. But Julius, who was the ship captain, found another one. We don't know if it's a surprise in the journey or exactly what happened. I was talking to Joanna this morning about, who was it you were taking to the airport?
My mother-in-law.
Mother-in-law, they get up at 3 a.m. and they've got to deal with one of the tickets with Frontier Airlines. I've flown Frontier. I know how they operate. They got there 45 minutes before boarding, but because the plane had already sold out and maxed out, they locked them out and said, come back on Friday, and they're like, oh, are you kidding? And so, anyway, heads up if you get a good deal on a flight.
Oh, and had to pay a $90 fee for Friday.
Yeah. So, and to get up super early again and enjoy the whole thing all over again. So with Paul and all of these people on this ship, I don't know if it was a Frontier Airlines sort of a thing, or if it was, did Julius have this planned all along? Was he thinking, well, we can get that one Alexandrian ship. I know that they go this time of year. Maybe we can catch that one. Or maybe it was a total surprise to the prisoners. Who knows? We don't know. But for whatever reason, they changed ships. And it says there in that first paragraph, Paul and the others in this group may have expected a change, or it could have come as a complete surprise. But here's the thing that stood out to me. Either way, a change of vessel would have been unsettling. And that's kind of how we are when life throws us a curveball, when there's a real change, especially if we didn't know it at all, if we didn't see it coming, then that is, those are the times when we're prone to really get discouraged. But really, when God allows those kinds of dramatic things to happen, that usually is when He's doing His best work. He's usually setting something else up that we don't see yet. I'm not an X's and O's kind of a guy, but I started to say I never played football. I did play football. I had an illustrious career in the 7th grade. It lasted one season. Some of you have heard the bowling ball story, but the short version is that I thought I went blind, but actually my helmet had spun around sideways and I was looking out the ear hole. Wow. The bowling ball just boom. He went right over me and I could hear my coach screaming, Howard! When I got my orientation and looked through the hole in my helmet, I could see bowling ball was going for a touchdown. He just went right over me. But in football, this guy right here, the left tackle, he gets paid more money than anybody on the offensive line. That is a big-time position. They made a movie about it called Blindside, if you ever saw the movie. That's because if the quarterback rolls back and he's getting ready to throw, his blind side is over here. And this guy is his only source of protection. And so he gets the big bucks. And so when you get blindsided by something, boy, it hurts, And sometimes, just to use that analogy, you're just You know, you're cruising. What is the name of one of these cruises that people go on? What are some? Carnival. You're on a, that's a perfect example. You're on a Carnival cruise. And you're just enjoying your Christian life. And wham, all of a sudden, we're going to change ships and we're going to need you to get on this lifeboat, or who knows. But there's a drastic change, and when you get blindsided, it can be discouraging. But always keep in mind, it is true, that's when God does some of his best work.
That's right.
These words are in the book that Kay wrote. It says, Paul knew that he was going to reach Rome, because God had told him that he would stand before Caesar and testify.
That's right.
So, I mean, if you're Paul, it doesn't matter if it's a surprise. I mean, I'll bet you that Paul was telling the guys, well, I didn't see this one coming. But you know what? God saw it coming. And God told me that I'm going to stand before Caesar. I don't know how I'm going to get there, if it's on hanging onto a plank to float the whole way. I don't know if God's going to send an iceberg along and I'm going to jump on. I don't know. But I know I'm going to make it. I guess they don't have icebergs in that part of the world. But I'm going to make it to Rome, and I'm going to stand before Caesar. And I would say the same thing to you guys. That if you have a desire, a dream in your heart, and it's pure, it's something that's really just a God thing that he put in your heart, and the sort of thing that just stays with you. The sort of thing that God birthed in you that's visionary, that's from him, that honors him, and that I truly mean that is purely just devoted to him. If he dreamed it up, then he's going to see it through.
That's right.
It's not about us, it's about him. So if he has to, so what if you have to jump through a few hoops and go over a couple of hurdles, and it happens in a way that you didn't plan that it would happen. God allowed me to have a dream. This is going back, oh goodness, let me do the math, and I might need to use my toes. This is about 20 years ago. I dreamed a dream, and I won't tell you the details, but it was a ministry-related dream that God has allowed to happen in my life. And the dream was that I was trying to get out on this field. I was in this locker room, and I needed to get out on the field. And in order to get there, I thought I was just going to walk out of the locker room and walk onto the field. But as I was walking towards the field, I had to go through the gymnasium, and all of a sudden, there was this huge obstacle course. All kinds of catastrophes had happened in the gym, and now I'm climbing over things and going underneath and inching along. And I woke up with a sensation that if God called me to it, he will take care of it. He will get me there. So what if there's obstacles in the way? God's obstacles are nothing to God. And if he changes your boat, then don't be discouraged, because God has so many different ways. And then as you look on down in that same section, notice these words. It talks about the path of each person who is surrendered to him. She writes these words, we can trust that he is at work in our lifelong journeys, especially in the legs of the journey that seem to take us off course or delay our plans. Especially then, if something seems to take you off course or delays your plans, then you can really trust, okay, God is at work here. I don't know, I'd like to get some input from you on this. I've always kind of felt like that one of two things is happening whenever a delay happens or a change of plans, something I didn't anticipate. One, maybe the enemy is working super hard to try to combat it, because he knows it's a good thing. He knows it's a pure thing. He doesn't want it to happen, so he's doing everything he can to make it stop. And one example of that would be Daniel prayed, and he prayed for 21 days. And then the angel Gabriel appears to him and says, I was discharged from God's throne. Your prayer was heard the moment that you started praying, you were heard. But I've been warring against the prince of Persia, and it's a reference to spiritual warfare. I've been battling in the heavenly realms. And sometimes I just wonder if we could see what's going on in the spirit realm, it might just blow us away. The battles and the warfare that's happening. And God heard the prayer. He answered the prayer, but there's a real battle going on. I think that's happening a lot of times.
That's right.
Two, the second thing I believe, I think that sometimes God's timing is so perfect that he has to say, no, Keith, just hold on a little bit. And one time I stopped at a red light, and I was just waiting there, and I was praying. And before the light turned green, the Lord spoke to my heart and said, I've got you at a red light. I'm going to turn the light green, but you're moving through traffic that is ordered by me. And by the way, he wasn't talking about the streets and the signals and the real cars that I was seeing. He was talking about my spiritual life. He was telling me something on a deep level. I've got you at a red light. And when it turns green, you're going to go. But trust me. And then over the following months, I saw what he had me stop several times. Then he opened doors and then stop and then merge and then stop. And actually, that was part of our coming here to Buckeye when we were in transition from Montrose. So in this next section, well, I tell you what, before we move on to that next section, just any comments so far? Yeah, Debbie.
I have a perfect example of God's perfect timing when you think that, God doesn't hear you, or you get mad because, you think that he's not, well.
Right.
And when I got diagnosed with breast cancer, and I got diagnosed on December 4th, and the surgery wasn't scheduled until, and you heard me when I gave my little, I don't know what you call it, when, you talk about your mom and at her funeral service. The surgery wasn't scheduled until December 30th. And my breast surgeon told me that, this is the worst kind of cancer, the most aggressive. We've got to get this out. 1 year typical survival rate, we got to get it out. And then they, scheduled it for December 30th, which was almost 2 months after January 30th, which was almost 2 months after my diagnosis date. And I was just, I gotta admit, I was mad. I was ticked. And my mom was living with us at the time, and I was in her room. I was, I was upset at very least. I was mad. I was complaining. I was, and my mom kept on telling me, God's timing is perfect. You do not have to be afraid. I kept saying it's going to metastasize, I'm mad, I was crying, I was, having a fit, was not happy. I was not one happy camper. And, she said, you don't have to worry, it's not going to metastasize, you don't have to worry. God's timing, she said, God had this surgery date planned from the beginning of time. And he is the only one who understands why, it's 2 months after your diagnosis date. Little did we know at the time that everyone in the family, myself first, then him, then my mom, came down with the type A flu, which then killed my mother. And if I had had an earlier surgery date, I would not have been able to be there when my mom passed away. I would not have been able to be there to bury my mother. And, you know, as it was, she passed away on January 13th. We buried her a week later. You officiated. God bless you. And a week later, I had my surgery. And so God, my mom was right. God had everything under control. And I had to go to him and ask for his forgiveness for not trusting.
Yeah. Well, it was such an honor to do the service too. And Debbie, thank you. Perfect example. You know that if it had happened sooner, you wouldn't have been able to be there for your mom and during that whole stretch. I think all of us have had those times, and I might not be right, but I think that God on some level must say, I know he's not going to understand this, but this is for his own good, and it's for the best. And then if we can keep our faith in him, then when we look back, that's when we see the fingerprints of God, and we trust him so much. So thanks for sharing. Anybody else with a thought along those lines? Yeah.
A friend of mine just a week ago, her mother died. She was 90, and she loved the Lord. And she was standing at her graveside saying goodbye to her mom, and they called her and told her son died.
Oh my goodness.
And she said, you know, at first I just thought, oh no, but she said the peace of God literally overwhelmed her.
That's awesome.
Standing there.
Goodness gracious.
Yes.
And she said, I have not had any worries where he was or anything. And she said, I've just never experienced such peace.
That's the peace that
Just a
passes
show of hands, how many of you have experienced that
Yes.
peace from time
Oh,
to time? I have. I just
Many times.
inexplainable, just the peace of God.
Yes.
Thanks for sharing, Nancy. So this next section that says a different ship, these words, second paragraph, if we follow Christ faithfully, our lifetime journeys will be filled with a lot of surprises, unexpected delays, as well as beautiful gifts and welcome. And then as you go on down, there's quite a statement down here at the bottom of that section. His grace, through our free will, allows us to say no. But that refusal comes at a cost. In saying no to our Heavenly Father, we say no to the greater depth of character he wants to develop in our lives. So that is something that I really believe. I think that God values our freedom and our choice so much that he gives us a playground called life and says, you choose, you make choices. And if we don't relinquish ourselves to his perfect will by our own free will, that we can, sometimes it can come at a great cost when he's wanting to develop character in our lives. This next section, a ship that we would not choose. You guys see that section in your book?
Yes.
Again, just a show of hands, how many of you have had, this kind of a redundant question, is rhetorical, I guess. How many of you have had in your life a ship that you wouldn't have chosen on your own? Never in a million years. I mean, whether it's disease or catastrophe or a marriage issue or a family member that is incarcerated, that's been a biggie for us. My goodness, I mean, you could name all kinds of things. It wasn't a ship that I would choose. Like,
that's right.
When you sign up for life, you know, when you go on registration day for life, it's kind of like the first day of school in high school, and they have the orientation. You got all these clubs you can sign up for, chess club, glee club, you know, football over here and all this. Nobody signs up and says, I want to sign up for going through a life-threatening disease. I want to sign up for having my son arrested. Or I want to, you know, those are not the things we choose. But God can work through those things. And there's this amazing story and you read it. If you didn't read it, I'll just give you the thumbnail sketch. She talks about a lady named Michelle who loved the Lord so much, who wanted to be a missionary her whole life. And her name has changed too. Kay told us that there were 2 stories in her book. This is one, and the other one is our son Zach. And the names are changed in all of them for purposes. I'm not quite sure what all it involves, but the publishers felt best about that. And but anyway, Michelle was, her whole life she wanted to be a missionary. And she had planned for it and had been called to God to be a missionary, even went to a Bible college to study missions, and she was so committed to it that she refused to date anyone unless they were also called to be a missionary. She just knew, I'm going to be a missionary. And I suppose, the guys that wanted to date her, she had a stack, and she says, this one wants to be a plumber. Oh, he's out. This guy wants to be a football player. He's out. Oh, there's a missionary. There's a possible chance. It's just too instant. She was only going to date someone that was going to be a missionary. And she married her husband, and shortly after they were married, they go, they went through the training. They go for a year of Bible college, a year of language school, and then they become missionaries to Africa. And they went for a 2-year term and then came home to raise funds, which is what typically happens. And I happen to know that these are Assemblies of God missionaries, and so they come back, they get their funding together. She started to notice something's not quite right. It doesn't seem like he's really dialed in, and he's kind of becoming a little detached and distant. But they go back into the mission field, and over the course of time, it just slowly starts to unravel that he just doesn't want to be a missionary, doesn't want to be in ministry, actually doesn't want to be a Christian, and stops going to church, just turns in his ministry credentials, just turns it in. And for 18 years they stayed married. She tried to remain faithful to him, but there were multiple affairs, multiple things that happened, just heart-rending story. It crushed her. They ended up divorcing, and she raised her kids the best she could on her own. It's no fault of her own. By the way, I just want to say this. Nobody wants to go through a divorce. Divorce happens sometimes.
Yes, it
But let's always keep in mind that there are wonderful, good people who did everything right, and they still get divorced. They did nothing wrong. They didn't want it. They didn't ask for it. And it happens sometimes. And that was definitely the case with Michelle in the story. But the story goes on to describe that after she had been divorced for several years, and I forget how long, then she became aware of a situation where a man that was a missionary, his wife had wigged out on him, and he had 3 teenage children. And Michelle only began to pray for him. She didn't know him, never, just heard about it and thought, I can relate to that. And just began to pray for him, that God would help him. And then 3 years later, they meet, and he asked her to go for coffee or whatever, and you know the story. Eventually, they get together. Well, they get married. And then they bring their blended family together, and they're able to just serve God side by side, And it was just a beautiful story, I felt, of the redemption of God. And that's just one example of how God does redeem our situations. A ship that you wouldn't choose, a different boat. We're going to look at some comments under this next section, letting God choose the ship. But before we do, just again, anybody want to just jump in and add anything to what we're talking about tonight? By the way, ladies and gentlemen, I'm glad we have Superman in here. I didn't know Superman went to our church. I'm thrilled to know that. By the way, did you see George Molina's post? They did something with Superman off here. You would have been in person. Anyway, all right, we're having a little, sorry, dear, having a little conversation. Letting God choose the ship. Um, Only God can deliver us, heal us, hold us, and help us in every journey, on every ship. Look at these words. It's in that next paragraph. Many types of ships and boats exist out on the water across the physical globe. And the same is true in a spiritual sense for our spiritual travel. There's all kinds of different boats and all kinds of different purposes. And then in this next paragraph she writes, God, who at times allows his own beloved children to be in situations of obvious peril. That's an amazing thought. Just think about that. Our wonderful Lord who loves us and cares for us, but at times he allows us to be in situations of obvious peril. I guess I'm thinking of one of the obvious ones, but the disciples are in the boat with Jesus, and they're traveling across the sea, and Jesus goes down in the bottom of the boat, goes to sleep. Huge storm comes up, and they're afraid that they're going to drown. And somebody finally wakes them up. Jesus, don't you even care? We don't like to think of that. Our approach to our Lord is always respectful and reverent and holy. But they're bailing water with buckets, and they're like, the least you could do is grab a bucket. Don't you even care? But God allows us to be in situations like that. And then, of course, he speaks to the wind and the wave. In fact, I like the wording of it. It says he rebukes the wind and the wave. The word that he used for rebuke is the same word that he uses when he drives out demons in other scripture passages. He said, quiet! Wow. And even the wind and waves obey him. And in my mind, I can just see, it's because it says there were several boats traveling together. And can you just imagine, you're on one of the boats traveling with Jesus' boat, and you see him off in the distance through the waves, and Jesus is standing up, and he says something you can't even hear above, or maybe you can, above the noise, above the storm. And all of a sudden, you just see peace coming your direction. And slowly, the waves just subside until you're left just totally amazed. And somebody just sort of drops a bucket in the water. What did he just do? He is even greater than the wind and the wave. Nature itself answers to him. And it leaves them thinking, who are you? That's our God. That's his power. But he does sometimes allow us to be in situations of obvious peril. She lists some for us. We love to tell the story of Daniel in the lion's den. The only thing about Daniel in the lion's den is that Daniel had to be in the lion's den. The mouths of the lions wouldn't have been shut if he had never been in the lion's den. So a beautiful story came out of that. And then we love to tell the story of Gideon. Boy, Gideon took on an army with massive numbers, 100,000 people. He only had 300 warriors. The only thing about that is he had to be facing this massive army with only 300 soldiers. Can you imagine? What are we doing? This is ridiculous. This is crazy. We love to talk about David facing a giant and throwing a rock. And by the way, if you've ever done a study about phenomenal, fascinating study about all the guards, the armament of the Philistine heroes, they had a helmet that would come just like this, and then it would sort of, part of the design is it would just sort of circle around an open area right on the forehead. The ones that study it say, not only did it hit him in the head with that rock, but it had to be a dead-on bullseye.
Wow.
It wasn't just, he knocked him in the head. He had to, that's pretty amazing, isn't it? And, but the thing about that, the only bad thing about David and Goliath is that he had to face Goliath. There would have been no victory over Goliath if he had backed down. I mean, he had to be a good a shot as like crazy. And he was so kind to me, just instructed me. I've never been, that's the only time I've been shooting in my life. I've never had guns or anything. And I know I was doing everything wrong. Somebody told me, no, man, don't have your hand on the trigger right, pointing it like that. He later told me, that, and I think we got to be good enough friends that he could just tell me, man, you were pretty close and you weren't hitting anything. It was sad, but anyways, but it was still fun. We have to face difficult situations sometimes, but it gives us a great testimony, great story of victory. Under this paragraph that I'm looking at right here at the end, these are powerful words in this chapter. He chooses the vessel on the journey. Our life focus must be to press in deeper, to know Him better, to love Him more, to strive to serve Him faithfully, and to endeavor to love others well. That's a great paragraph. He chooses the vessel. If we're following Him and if we're truly surrendered to Him, then I really believe that God does this with each of our lives. I think He gave me a picture of it with the 2 years of coaching basketball. During 2011 and 12 season, and then again 2012-13 season, Yonker High School asked me to coach the freshman basketball team. And the way it happened was just that, Coach Burke, we were just parents. We loved our boys and just followed them and watched the games. And he knew that I had played college basketball, and he calls me up and he says, my freshman coach, this is the day of tryouts, by the way, day of tryouts, just a couple of weeks before the season starts. My freshman coach just walked. He got a better offer at another school. Can you coach? And I said, no, I can't. I'm a pastor of a church. I'm doing good to be at the games, just to be there. You know what I'm talking about, don't you? Yeah. And I guess why I'm thinking about this, another friend of mine, Kyle Bateman, I was on staff with him, and he was asked just this last year to coach his daughter's senior year at her Christian school, and he's doing it. He's the pastor of a church of 2,000 in Wichita Falls, and the board said, man, this is a golden opportunity, once in a lifetime, do it. So he's doing it for this one season. But when I talked to our church board about it, they were so amazing, always have been so supportive, and they said, just think of what an opportunity it is to be in the community. You're going to be in front of 1,500 fans, and meeting players and coaches. And man, and I'm telling you, I represented you guys really well, except for one game. I got a technical foul, but even in that, God still used it. God used it. There's a whole story behind it, and literally, a referee had tears in his eyes when I apologized and said, "I honor you. I'm sorry. You're right. I shouldn't have said that." And he literally had tears coming down, so he's trying to not cry, and it's a long story. Anyway, what I started to say, something that God taught me through that experience was coaching. When you're coaching, you try to see what the opponent has, and then you think to yourself, who do I got on my team that matches against the opponent in the best way? And it's different people at different times, at different stretches of the season. For instance, we had this one kid that could shoot lights out. And man, he was very gifted. I mean, he was little Steph Curry miniature, and he could shoot from way out. But he was not a great ball handler. And if the other team found that out, man, they would get up in his grill, and he couldn't get a shot off. So there were certain times where I would use him, man, he could light it up 12 points like that for us. But then if it wasn't working, then I needed to get the tall kid in there, let him bang bodies inside. And there's different strategies at different times. And I kind of imagine God with our lives saying, man, I could really use Al and Paulette right there at BFA right now. Thank the Lord. You know? I'll never forget this. Nancy and Joanne came to our church at the same hour. They didn't know each other. The same hour, God blessed us with those two. And He knew that we needed them. And our heavenly coach does that. And He not only does He do it with the whole team, but He does it with us as individuals. He knows what He's doing in our lives. He knows what He's up to. And we can trust Him. Okay, any parting shots? I went over. I broke the rule. I waxed the elephant tonight. I waxed eloquent tonight.
That's a pretty shiny elephant.
Anybody with any closing comments as we get ready to wind down? Just anything that connects with what we're talking about? Okay. God bless you all so much. I just love you guys. I thank God for each one of you. Father, I just pray that you would bless us as we go. Thank you for being here with us tonight.
Yes, Jesus.
And I know that different ones of us are facing different things, different stretches of this journey. We trust you. We know that you're doing good. Sometimes there's obstacles in our way. Sometimes we find ourselves on a boat that we didn't plan to take. And we sometimes wonder, what's going on? Do you even care? But honestly, we know you. You have such a track record of faithfulness. We know that you care. We know that you're up to something. You have a strategy going on. I just bless my brothers and sisters to hear your voice. I pray that you help us to discern your voice. Lord, lead us and guide us and have your perfect way in our lives. And Lord, I do especially pray for our mega sports camp in the morning. It'll be a chance for kids to invite Jesus in their heart. I pray that it would be very easy for the kiddos to say, yes, I want that. Let it be so easy. And on Friday, when the parents come to see their kids show off what they've learned, let us connect with parents, God. Let us have families to join our church because of it.
Yes, Jesus.
That's why all of our
Thank you.
coaches have been working so hard this
Yes.
week. And just bless them, each one, Lord, with rest tonight, I pray. We want to give you all glory and honor in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
All right, you guys.